Do you like playing with fire? And by playing with fire, I mean using it to burn everyone and everything around you to a crisp, even your allies sometimes. Well, if that's the case, then you, my friend, are an Infernal Artillerist. And that is exactly the build that we are going to be building today. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. My name's Coleman Webb, and this is Limit Break 20, where we take the characters that you want to play in your tabletop role playing games and we create them in Daggerheart. So let's go ahead and dive right into the build. When we talk about creating a blaster in tabletop RPGs, we're really talking about creating a character that can inflict massive amounts of damage to multiple enemies at once. And with this build, that's exactly what we're going to do. But unlike most blasters that are usually squishy evocation wizards that are hiding behind their frontline tanks, we are actually going to be that frontline tank, and we are going to be just burning everything in our path. So I'm excited for this build, and this thing is going to hit extremely hard. One of the unique things about the Infernal Artillerist is that we are going to be able to cast Fireball 3 times with one spellcast roll. So yeah, let's jump into this build. For our starting class, we are going to go Sorcerer. Sorcerers get access to the Arcana at Midnight domain, and their evasion starts at 10. Their hope feature is called Volatile Magic, and what it allows you to do is to spend 3 hope to reroll any number of your damage dice on an attack that deals magic damage. That's great. That just makes it so if we do get a really bad roll, especially at higher proficiencies, we can spend 3 hope and reroll those die, and that's going to feel a lot better. They also get Arcane Sense, and with Arcane Sense, you can sense the presence of magical people and objects within close range, which is nice. This is just sort of a detect magic that you have all the time. That's going to feel pretty fun. Additionally, sorcerers get Minor Illusion. So, what Minor Illusion does is it allows them to make a spell cast roll, and on a success, they create a minor visual illusion that's bigger than themselves within close range. This illusion is convincing to anyone at close range or further. So, really good utility there. You can use this to maybe create a distraction or a copy of yourself to try to maybe confuse some enemies that are maybe trying to shoot at you from far range. A lot of cool uses for this. But the class ability that we are here for is Channel Raw Power. What Channel Raw Power does is once per long rest, we can place a domain card from our loadout into our vault and choose to either gain a hope equal to the level of the card or enhance a spell that deals damage, gaining a bonus to your damage roll equal to twice the level of that card. Okay, so this does a couple of cool things to pump up our damage. One, it's a really great way to gain hope. Now, pro tip, you can only have 6 hope, so you wouldn't want to necessarily burn a 7, 8, 9, or 10 level card to get that hope back because you're probably having overkill there. So that's just a freebie for you. But to enhance the damage of a spell by putting an active card into your vault is actually a pretty good feature, especially because there are some domain cards that make it so once per long rest you can do something. Well, if you've done that thing, it's kind of pointless being held in your card anyway, so you may as well just put that puppy in the vault and double the damage on it. So, an actually pretty unique feature that I think has a lot more utility than what you'd think at first glance. Now, for our subclass, we are going to go Primal Origin. And the spellcast trait that Primal Origin has is Instinct. And what Primal Origin does is it allows us to manipulate magic. Your Primal Origin allows you to modify the essence of magic itself. After you cast a spell or make an attack using a weapon that deals magic damage, you can mark a stress to do one of the following: extend the spell or attack's reach by 1 range, gain a +2 bonus to the action's roll result, double a damage die of your choice, or hit an additional target within range. Okay, so that is a lot of really cool utility that we get from Manipulate Magic. So the two that we're going to be using most often are that first one, to expend a spell or attack's reach by 1. That's important for this build. And the second is to target an additional adversary, which again are going to be the two primary uses for what we're going to be building today with the Infernal Artillerist. So for our traits, we're going to be prioritizing Instinct. So we are going to be putting a +2 to there. Now, we're also going to want to make sure we increase our knowledge as we're increasing our stats. And the reason being is because uh, we're going to be able to have a pretty solid debuff that is going to be based on our knowledge. So we want to make sure that we keep that up as much as possible. So we'll be adding a +1 to knowledge. Now, for your other +1, this could be really anything, kind of pick your preference here. For us, I might just say, let's go ahead and do strength, just in case there is a roll that requires us to use strength. We can go ahead and have at least a +1 to that. Now, for the dump stat. There's a few different ones that we can take here. And for this character, we're not going to be very agile at all. And so I think agility is going to be our dump stat. And with the way that we're going to be building it, it's not going to get any better. So I say let's just go ahead and commit to just sucking at agility. We're going to be taking a feature that is going to give us the ability to offset that in certain circumstances. So stay tuned. And that means we have 0 to presence. Now, for our weapons, we are going to be going with hand runes. And what's really cool about hand runes is that they are actually only a one-handed weapon. They use instinct, which is great for us, and their range is very close. So we do have a little bit of distance there. They do a D10 magic and they have a one-handed burden, which having the one-hand burden is nice because it's going to be able to give us some additional defensive utility. Because the second weapon that we are going to be taking is going to be a tower shield. And basically what this is going to have is a feature called barrier. Barrier is going to give us a +2 to our armor score, which is fantastic, but a -1 to our evasion. So we are going to be a little clumsy and really easy to hit, but that's okay because we are going to be making up for it later on. So for our starting armor, we are going to be doing something that I haven't done in a build yet, and I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I think that this is just the right one. But we are going to be going full plate armor. And in Daggerheart, full plate armor is great because it has the highest damage thresholds for us, which means that we aren't going to be taking major or severe damage as much. However, it does come with a feature that's called Very Heavy. And what this is a -2 to our evasion and a -1 to our agility. And that's sort of why I wanted us to have a -1 to agility, because if we're just going to suck at it, we're going to suck at it, right? Because if we were to have agility be our 0, well, now we have two -1s. Or even if it's a +1, we have two zeros. So I just felt that committing to not being very fast in this regard made some sense because, again, we're just like this giant flame juggernaut, which is going to be awesome. Now, for our domain cards, sorcerers get access to both the Midnight and the Arcana domain. There's only really a couple different domain cards in Midnight that I think is even somewhat thematic for this character, but we can look at those in a bit. The ones that we're going to be taking are mostly in the Arcana domain. The first one, without a doubt, is going to be Rune Ward. So with Rune Ward, you have a deeply personal trinket that can be infused with protective magic and held as a ward by you and ally. Describe what it is and why it's important to you. The ward's holder can spend a hope to reduce incoming damage by 1d8. If the ward's die resolves in 8, the ward's power ends after it reduces damage this turn. It can be recharged for free on your next rest. So this is actually pretty fantastic for us because this is on average going to give us a 4.5 reduction to damage that we have incoming. And remember, we took plate armor. So before we get into major damage thresholds, that's going to be 8 plus our level of 1 is 9 plus this means we've got to take about 13 damage before we even jump into severe damage. And in tier 1, most enemies aren't going to be putting that out on you. At least, hopefully not, unless your GM's an absolute sadist. But this is cool because we spend a hope, reduce that damage, and in some circumstances, if someone rolls a 5, we could spend this hope and potentially have that drop it down. If you roll a 6 or 7 or an 8, you've negated damage completely. So that's the other feature, is that you can negate damage completely if you roll high enough. Now, if we roll that 8, yeah, we've got to put it away for a bit and we don't have it, but we get it on our next rest, and that can be a short rest as well. For our second domain card, we're going to take one of my favorite level 1 domain cards, which is Unleash Chaos. What Unleash Chaos does is at the beginning of each session, you place a number of tokens equal to your spellcast trait on this card. Make a spellcast roll against a target within far range and spend any number of tokens to channel raw energy from within you to unleash against them. On a success, roll a number of d10s equal to the tokens you spent and deal that much magic damage to the target. Mark a stress to replenish this card with tokens up to your spellcast trait. At the end of each session, clear all unspent tokens. All right, so with Unleash Chaos, what I love about it is that this is one of those domain cards that gets stronger as you do, right? Because it's going to be using your spellcast trait for these number of dice. And you don't have to spend all of them. So if we get to the point where our spellcast trait is 5, we are going to be doing 5 d10 worth of damage on one target, or a d10 on 5 different targets. It's however we want to split it up. I think what's also great is that you just get the free tokens, and if you want to use this ability again, you just mark a stress. So a lot of flexibility with it, and I think it's a really solid pickup for tier 1 and level 1 of gameplay. For our ancestry, we are going to be taking a mixed ancestry known as a Dawn, which is a Dracona and a Fawn. So for the Fawn, we are going to be taking Caprine Leap. And what Caprine Leap does is you leap anywhere within close range as though you were using normal movement, allowing you to vault over objects, jump across gaps, and scale barriers with ease. All right. So this is going to be one of the reasons why I was okay taking agility as a dump stat. Some of those things that would call for an agility check, you can just do. Jump across a gap, pretty common, right? Maybe there's a bunch of debris and destroyed furniture that's in front of you and you have to get to your target that's within close range. Maybe that would be considered some type of dangerous terrain, but not for you. You could just ask your GM to use your Caprine Leap feature and you can move there with ease. So I think that this is going to really offset our agility. And if you are playing a character that is dumping agility, this might be a really good top ancestry option for you to take. And in my last Daggerheart session, we actually ran into this exact same situation where there was a trap that was set that created this gap, and everybody had to make an agility check. And I had to, as the Seraph, make the jump and use my divine wielder blade to tie a rope to it and throw it at the same time the wizard jumped to give him advantage on his agility check, which he made. And it was pretty cool. But if he was a fawn, he could just Caprine Leap over that, and we wouldn't have to do all the nonsense, and I wouldn't have had to mark a stress. So there we go. For our Dracona feature, we are going to be taking Elemental Breath. And what Elemental Breath allows you to do, you choose an element for your breath, such as electricity, fire, or ice. You can use this breath against a target or group of targets within very close range, treating it as an instinct weapon that deals D8 magic damage using your proficiency. So this is going to be sort of the crux of the build and the main reason why we wanted to start as a sorcerer. So one, this is an instinct weapon. It's dealing magic damage, which means we can use all of the sorcerer's features from our primal origin subclass. So that's a big win for us. Also, this attack targets multiple enemies within very close range, which is great. We actually had the Dracona use this exact same ability for us when we were fighting a bunch of dire bats in our last session, and it was cool because he hit multiple enemies and put out minor damage on 2 enemies. Anytime you can get damage on multiple characters, that's a huge win in Daggerheart. Which is nice about this system because it's not just about putting all the damage onto one character. Because of the damage thresholds, it actually makes sense to maybe do some things where you can attack multiple enemies to slowly chip away at them over the encounter. So as far as community goes, this is going to be pick your preference. For me, I think that probably Wildborn would probably make the most sense. And the reason being is because it's nice to basically have advantage on stealth rolls. So what it does, it gives you the Lightfoot feature, which basically says that your movement is naturally silent. You have advantage on rolls to move without being heard, which I don't know any stealth check that you're making on trying that doesn't want you to be heard. So it's kind of a no-brainer for me. It just gives you advantage on stealth. So for our experiences, we want to have a offensive experience where we could spend a hope and get a +2 and then maybe more as we level up to an attack roll. And so for us, the first experience that we're going to have is called Danger Close. And what Danger Close does is it makes it so if we have an ally that is within close range to us, or maybe very close range, work with your GM on this, and we are going to be using our instinct weapon or any ability that's going to be using fire, we can basically mark a hope and increase that spellcast roll by 2. The second experience that I'm going to put here can be pretty much for anything, but I'm going to be putting it as Blasting Zone. I think Blasting Zone is just going to be a experience that you could use on a reaction roll to maybe avoid an area of effect worth of damage. So let's talk about tactics for the Infernal Artillerist. What I love about this character is he is online at level 1. So your primary tactic here is you are going to try to position yourself within close range to as many adversaries as possible. And even though we're going to be using our instinct weapon, which has a very close range and is a D8 that uses our proficiency and is magic damage, that allows us to use manipulate magic, which means we mark a stress and we can increase the range of that attack by 1, which means you're going to be covering close distance, which is basically 10 to 30 feet away. So you're going to be able to basically hit anybody within, let's call it 5 or 6 squares of you when you use this attack. And that is absolutely awesome. Now, here's a key thing. During our last session, when our Dracona Ranger used his fire breath, he had actually succeeded with fear. And I was adjacent to him and the enemies he was targeting. And because of that, I had to make a reaction roll to avoid the damage from that breath. And thank goodness I'm an elf and I had quick reaction and got advantage. Otherwise, I would have been toast. So when it comes to playing this character, think about spending hope to give your allies advantage if you happen to use a spell attack that ends up targeting them because you succeeded with fear. It's just something I'm seeing at the table, and I want you to be aware of when you play this because if this is your whole stick, make sure you let your party know. And if you don't need to attack multiple enemies, you can use your hand runes. That's just going to be a flat d10, which is going to be fine. And it still has a very close range. And if you really just need to put out damage, go ahead and use Unleash Chaos. Just, flavor it as fire and you're just concentrating on an enemy. And if you need to use that a couple times, mark a stress to replenish it. Also, the Elemental Breath doesn't cost a resource and it scales up with your proficiency. So it's going to become stronger as you do, which is a main reason why we decided to take that as our weapon because it has sustained damage to multiple targets. Now remember, you also took plate armor, so your main damage threshold is 9 before you hit major damage and 18 before you hit severe damage. And because we took Rune Word, that basically punches that up by another 4. So you're going to be extremely tanky and have plenty of armor slots to absorb any damage that you're taking in the front line. At level 2, you get to go ahead and make up a new experience, so good luck with that. Also, you get an increase to your proficiency. So now you're going to be able to do an additional d8 worth of damage with your instinct weapon, as well as any spells that increase by proficiency. For our level up options, for us, I think we need to go ahead and increase our instinct by 1, punching that up to 3, and then also increasing our knowledge by 1, punching that up to a 2. I'm going to go ahead and say let's also go ahead and increase our stress slots because we're going to try to use manipulate magic as much as possible. We want to make sure we have plenty of stress slots. We don't have plenty of stress. No one wants more of that. In case we have an extended combat with not a chance to rest. So for our level 2 domain card, it's an obvious choice. We're taking Cinder Grasp. And what Cinder Grasp allows you to do is that you make a spell cast roll against a target within melee range, and on a success, the target instantly bursts into flames, takes 1d10 plus 3 magic damage, and is temporarily lit on fire. When a creature acts while on fire, they must take an extra 2d6 magic damage if they are still on fire at the end of their action. So what I love about this is it's a d20 plus 3. So that's going to basically be 10.5 plus 3, so 13.5 points of damage for someone within melee range. Okay? So not only is that pretty decent damage, but that second part there was that the adversary has to take 2d6 additional damage if they are still on fire when they take an action. So what that effectively means is that the GM now has a choice. They can say, I'm still going to attack you, but I'm going to take this damage, or I'm going to actually use my entire spotlight to get rid of this condition. Stop, drop, and roll, whatever it is they do that, and that is their action. So this is a really good use of action economy. It's also a really strong mechanic. Now, the only bummer about this is it is melee range. It targets one person and it doesn't scale up. So this isn't something that when you get to the point of, tier 3 or tier 4, the damage really isn't that great. So, but it's still a really good card. And I think it's got its situational uses, especially for, like I said, that action economy. At level 3, I think the level up options that we need to take is we need to take one more stress slot to punch us up to 8 stress. And let's go ahead and increase our health by 1, so that just makes us a little bit better of a frontline tank. So for our level 3 domain card, one that I think we should take that is actually going to be more of a benefit for your party and make it so you can do something without stealing the spotlight is going to be Chokehold. So what Chokehold does, you position yourself behind a creature who's about your size. You can mark a stress to pull them into a chokehold, making them temporarily vulnerable. When a creature attacks a target who is vulnerable in this way, they deal an extra 2d6 worth of damage. So here's what's really cool, is that you basically get to mark a stress, set up your ally with advantage, so you get to roll a d6 for them, and they get to add that to their roll. And if they succeed, they take an extra 2d6 worth of damage, which is going to be an extra 7 damage. I think that's really cool. And what that allows you to do is be a team player without stealing the spotlight. And because that's one of the harder things about Daggerheart, which is how do you share the spotlight? Some people like to do things more than others and have trouble speaking up. So for you to actually just step in and role play a really cool thing to maybe help the warrior out with their attack by putting it into a chokehold could be a really cool synergistic thing to have, but also gives you some flexibility and utility since you are going to be up close and personal anyways. What we're going to do at level 4 is we are going to go ahead and take one more HP slot. Just going to make us a little bit tankier. And then for our second level up option, I think what we should do, and it kind of sounds funny, is increase our evasion. I mean, why not? We've got it available. We've already maxed out stress for tier 2 as well as HP. So let's go ahead and increase our evasion from 7 to, you got it, 8, baby. We're going to basically be hit by everything. But I will say, my Seraph does have an evasion of like 8. Occasionally, once or twice per combat, the GM just rolls like crap and rolls a 6 or a 7, and it feels good to get that miss in. All right, so for our domain card here, we are going to be taking something that, as I had mentioned earlier, we are picking our traits, is we want to have the ability to debuff our adversaries, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. We are going to be taking Glyph of Nightfall. And what that does is that you make a spellcast roll against a target within very close range. On a success, spend a hope to conjure a dark glyph upon their body that exposes their weak point, temporarily reducing the target's difficulty by a value equal to your knowledge minimum of 1. Okay. So if we keep going on the knowledge trajectory here throughout tier 3 and tier 4, we're going to basically have a 4 to our knowledge, which is going to be pretty cool because from a roleplay perspective, you get to do all the cool, fun, detective, and analytical things. But when you use Glyph of Nightfall, what basically happens is that you reduce the difficulty by 2 and going all the way up to 4 for an adversary, which is pretty cool. Now, this is also temporary, which means the adversary has to make a choice. They can basically choose to use their spotlight to find a way to get rid of that Glyph of Nightfall if they have the ability to, or they just have to take it and now everything that's going to hit them is going to be at a lower difficulty, which is really cool. Now, an honorable mention here is going to be Preservation Blast. And what that does is you make a spell cast roll against all targets within melee range. The targets you succeed against are forced back to far range and take d8 plus 3 magic damage using your spellcast trait. That's pretty good. The problem is it's within melee range, so it hits multiple targets melee range. Where this would be really good, and I might have to think about this in a future build, is if you are a giant. And what's really cool about that is that basically you can make anything that says melee basically gets extended out to very close. And so what you could do is if you had this ability as a giant would be to use the sorcerer feature, manipulate magic, to then hit everybody within close range and knock them back to far range. You'd probably be the best player of keep away that anyone's ever seen, and your GM would have to get creative from having you basically just play badminton and keep knocking enemies away from the rest of the party. But good honorable mention, but I think we're going to go Glyph of Nightfall for our build. Level 5. So now we are in tier 3 of gameplay. And you're going to get another experience, so go ahead and make up whatever you want. We're also going to increase our proficiency to 3, which is fantastic. So now we get to roll 3d8 or 3 damage die for whatever you're using. And what's really cool is that we get some new level up options. All right. So this is the point where we take the build from really, really good to absolutely bonkers. And the reason I say that is because we are going to be multi-classing into Wizard. So a couple things. When you multi-class, it takes up your entire level up option. So can't increase our traits. We can't add, not add stress, add more stress slots or HP. What it also does is it prevents the mastery. So we're only going to be able to get a specialization between the two. And I'm okay with that. And I think you will be too when you see what we're going to do. So for Wizard, we don't get to use their hope feature, which is okay. But what we do get is we get a couple cool class features. So the first one is Prestidigitation, and what that does is you perform harmless subtle magical effects at will. For example, you can change an object's color, create a smell, light a candle, cause a tiny object to float, illuminate a room, or repair a small object. Really cool, and I think that there's a lot of unique fun utilities for this. But the other one that we get is called Strange Patterns. And this one's nice because it allows us to get some additional resources. What Strange Patterns does is that you choose a number between 1 and 12. When you roll that number on a duality die, gain a hope or clear stress, you can change this number when you take a long rest. So basically, you increase your chance of getting hope or reducing stress by about 16, 17%, which is pretty cool. Just the fact that it's on any duality die roll, even reaction rolls. So you're just going to feel good when you roll that. I've seen that actually happen with our wizard in our party, and it's pretty fun. For the domain that we're taking, we are going to be taking the Codex domain. So now we can select cards from the Codex domain that is at uh, half of our level rounded up. So at level 5, we can take level 3 or below cards. So when it comes to the subclass for the wizard, we have two choices. And I really was close on getting School of Knowledge because it actually gets us online to doing what I want to do a little bit faster. But I felt like for this character, we had to go School of War. And what School of War does is one, we basically get an additional hit point slot from Battle Mage. But what's really cool is we get Face Your Fear. So when you succeed with Fear on an attack roll, you deal an extra 1d10 worth of magic damage. And what I like about this is that this just works with any attack roll. So because our elemental breath only does a d8 with no modifiers, if we succeed with fear, we now get to add a d10, which is an extra 5.5 on average. So that's going to be just a nice damage bump, not just for that, but for pretty much any attack we make. So I felt like it was just on theme with what we're doing for the Infernal Artillerist, but it was really, really close to taking School of Knowledge. And for the domain card that we're going to take, we are going to be jumping into the Codex domain and taking Book of Norai. And when you take the Book of Norai, you get two spells with it. The first spell is called Mystic Tether. And what you do is you make a spell cast roll against a target within far range. On a success, they're temporarily restrained and must mark a stress. If your target a flying creature, the spell grounds and temporarily restrains them. So that's a pretty cool feature. You can basically just bring someone that's flying to the ground and also have them restrained, which is a really powerful feature. Keeps them from moving, which is cool. But and as you know, because we are building the Infernal Artillerist, we are here for Fireball. And Fireball is bonkers. So what you do, you make a spellcast roll against a target within very far range. On a success, hurl a sphere of fire towards them that explodes on impact. The target and all creatures within very close range of them must make a reaction roll of 13. Targets who fail take d20 plus 5 magic damage using your proficiency. Targets who succeed take half damage. So couple of things here. One, very far range means you're hitting anybody that's on the battle map potentially that you can see, which is ginormous. The second is that this makes it so that you are doing a d20 plus 5 damage using your proficiency, which means that this increases for you. So right now, on average, is going to be 36.5 damage from anyone who fails their save and 18.25 from anybody who makes their save. That is absolutely crazy. But there's more. Because we are a sorcerer, we can use manipulate magic and we can target a second creature with fireball, effectively allowing us to fire two fireballs for the price of one spellcast roll and the incredibly low price of a stress. That is pretty awesome. So, especially if you have the ability to hit multiple adversaries with one fireball and another set has multiple adversaries, you can do a ton of damage to everybody on the battlefield. Now, the caveat is that all creatures within very close range have to make a save, which means that you probably don't want to use this if you have the warrior or the guardian standing next to a mob of people and you're just going to throw the fireball, they're probably going to side eye you because that is a ton of damage. And if they make a reaction roll and fail it, they're taking 36.5 points of damage, which means they're probably taking severe damage from friendly fire. So be careful. I could just be funny if you were playing with a guardian who multi-class into like a sorcerer or something, and he's using counterspell on you to keep you from throwing the damage on him. I just think that'd be hilarious to be counterspelled by your party member. I'm sure it's happened. If it has happened, I would love to hear about it in the comments below because that sounds like a story I want to tell and hear. At level 6, for our level up option, we are going to spend the entire level up option increasing our proficiency. So basically, now we go from having 3 to 4, which means we get to roll another d20 when we launch our fireball, or a d8 if we use our instinct weapon, but we're using fireball. So that's a big damage increase of 10.5 on average. Now, for our domain card selection, we are taking Book of Sigil. And with Book of Sigil, we really get three spells in one here. The first spell that we get is called Adjust Appearance. You magically shift your appearance and clothing to avoid recognition. Pretty straightforward. I'm not diving into that. But the next one is one of my favorites, which is Parallella. And what that basically does is that allows us to spend two hope to cast this spell on yourself or an ally within close range. The next time the target makes an attack, they can hit an additional target within range that their attack roll would succeed against. You can only hold this spell on one creature at a time. There it is. So now at level 6, we get the ability to cast 3 fireballs. We spend 2 hope to cast Parallella on ourselves. And then what happens is we mark a stress to use Manipulate Magic to attack an additional adversary within range, which is far range, which means anybody on the battlefield. So now you are putting out 4d20 plus 5 worth of damage if they fail their save. So that's going to be 47 points of damage if they fail their save, and 23.5 points of damage if they make their save. And keep in mind, if you succeeded that roll with fear, you are adding a d10 worth of damage, increasing that by another 5.5, punching that up to over 50 or close to 30 on a fail, which is fantastic. And remember, they are not going to be taking half damage on that d10 because the half damage only applies to Fireball. At level 7, I'm going to say let's go ahead and increase our trait. So that means we have a 4 to our instinct and a 3 to our knowledge, and that's going to increase our Glyph of Nightfall. So if we do cast that on an adversary, they drop their difficulty by 3. So for our level 7 domain card, we are going to be taking Book of Grin. And this gives us 3 different things. The first is Arcane Deflection, which is awesome. Once per long rest, spend a hope to negate the damage of an attack targeting you or an ally within very close range. This is cool because this basically allows you to spend a hope and say, no, you're not taking that severe damage. And that's going to be really, really cool. The second feature we get is called Time Lock. And what this does is you target an object within far range. That object stops in time and space exactly where it is until your next rest. If a creature tries to move it, make a spell cast roll against them to maintain the spell. So that's really cool. The glass ball is going to be falling and it's going to shatter on the floor. You can use Time Lock to stop it. That's going to be a really cool thing to be able to do when you need to use it. But we are here as the Infernal Artillerist for Wall of Flame. And what Wall of Flame does is that you make a spell cast roll and on a success create a temporary wall of magical flame between 2 points within far range. All creatures in its path must choose a side to be on. Anything that subsequently passes through the wall takes 4d10 plus 3 magic damage. This is cool. This is a very strong battlefield control spell because you basically can pick 2 points and cut enemies off from one another. And if the GM is going to have them move across that, 40-10 plus 3 damage is about 25 points of damage. And that is not a that's not nothing, especially at tier 3. I mean, you're probably going to be potentially giving them major damage just to get back in range to attack you. So really cool feature, and I think it's definitely on point for what we're trying to build. So level 8, we are now in the fourth and final tier of gameplay. So we get to make up another experience, as well as we get to increase our proficiency to 5. Now, for our level up options, I think what we have to do is we have to jump right into increasing our proficiency. So that is going to pump up our proficiency to 6. All right, so here's what this means. At level 8, now that our proficiency is 6, if you spend 2 hope to cast Parallella, and you spend a stress to use Manipulate Magic to target a third adversary with Fireball, on average, you are going to be putting out over 70 points of damage and almost 40 points of damage on those that succeed on their save, which is insane. All right, for our level 8 domain card, we're going to be taking my favorite Return to Sender spell, which is Spell Charge. And what Spell Charge allows you to do is that when you take magic damage, place tokens equal to the number of hit points you marked on this card. You can store a number of tokens equal to your spellcast trait. When you make a successful attack against a target, you can spend any number of tokens to add a d6 for each token spent to your damage roll. Now, this is great because we are going to be a frontline tank and we have tons of armor slots and we have a strong amount of health. We're going to be taking damage quite a bit. And because of that, we are going to be able to use this up to our spellcasting trait to just add additional d6s worth of damage whenever we want to. So what I like about this is now we actually have a pretty decent way for us to increase our elemental breath, which I think is fantastic. Between the War Mage feature of succeeding with fear by adding a d10, now we have some d6s we can throw on it. We might be able to pump that damage up quite a bit. For level 9, we are going to just go ahead and max out what we can for our spellcast trait for Instinct at 5, and we're going to increase our knowledge to 4. So now when we use Glyph of Nightfall, we are dropping their difficulty down by 4, which is going to be pretty awesome. For our second level up option, let's go ahead and increase our subclass here. So for our upgraded subclass, we are going to go ahead and upgrade the School of War subclass, which I think is just really fantastic. So the first thing you get is Conjure Shield. You can maintain a protective barrier of magic. When you have at least 2 hope, you add your proficiency to your evasion. Okay, so let's talk about that. Remember, we just capped our proficiency at 6 right now. So what we are talking about is that we are going to be going from a evasion of 8 to an evasion of 14 as long as we have 2 hope and we don't spend that. That is monstrous. That actually increases our defensive prowess by a ton. And I think now you could actually make a case to do something a little bit different with our domain card, which is what we're going to be doing going forward. So I'll take a look at that. The second feature we get is called Fueled by Fear. And what this basically does is this makes it so the extra magic damage we do from Face Your Fear increases to 2d10. So now when we succeed on an attack with fear, we basically get to add 2d10. So basically an extra 11 points of damage on average, which is awesome. So for our level 9 domain card, this is going to synergize very well with the upgraded subclass we just took. We are going to be taking Vanishing Dodge. And what Vanishing Dodge does is when an attack made against you that would deal physical damage fails, you can spend a hope to envelop yourself in shadows, becoming hidden and teleporting to a point within close range of the attacker. You remain hidden until the next time you make an action roll. Okay, so this is unique. So the hidden condition in Daggerheart makes it so attacks against you have disadvantage. So I want to just put this into perspective on what this does. Now that we have an evasion of 14 because our proficiency is so high, we're going to be able to use this ability quite a bit. So we spend the hope and now we can move anywhere within close range. Remember, our agility sucks, so anytime we get movement, that's fantastic. And we remain hidden until we make an action roll, which means we can move and attack an enemy while still being hidden. Now, Daggerheart's rules make it so if you're hidden, you don't get any type of advantage on your attack, but it could be up to your GM on how that works. So, but what's really cool about this is if we maintain that Conjure Shield up, we now have a 14, and disadvantage is going to be the DM re-rolling his d20 to try to hit us on the next attack. So to put this math into perspective for you, if you have an evasion at 14 right now, and the GM has a +3 to their d20 roll, it means they need to roll an 11 to hit you. Well, basically, if they have disadvantage, that means that they basically go from a 50% chance to hit you to a 25% chance to hit you. That's big. So being able to have that hidden condition now that we have an increased evasion is awesome. And you might even have different armor at this point in time. You might not even be rocking the hopefully at this point in time, it's going to be legendary plate armor, but there could be other things out there you have which would drive your evasion even higher, which would be really, really good. So at level 10, for our level up options, I think we need to go ahead and increase our stress just to get some more resources for us. But then also at this point, with our higher evasion feature unlocked, I'd be okay go ahead and increasing our evasion, driving that up to a 15, which is going to be nice because that's also going to be able to fuel our dodge maneuver, which is going to be cool. All right, so at level 10, I think that your domain card's going to really pick your preference. I think you could take Teleport from Codex. I think you take Blink Out. Those would give you some more situational movement, right? Being able to teleport and bring everybody with you to get out of danger, I think is really cool, especially if like the castle's falling down and crumbling, you can teleport back to the tavern. I think that's kind of a funny thing. Blink Out's nice for maybe some more in combat utility for teleportation. But for us, the card that we're going to be looking at taking is Arcane Reflection. And what this basically allows us to do is when you would take magic damage, you can spend any number of hope to roll that many d6s. If any roll sticks, the attack is reflected back to the caster, dealing the damage to them instead. Okay. So this is pretty cool because if we get hit with a magic attack, we can roll d6. We can spend hope and roll d6s to try to avoid that. That's an okay feature. But remember, we're going to try to at least always hold on to 2 hope to drive our evasion up by 6. I think that that's too powerful of a feature for us not to use. Now, the good news is that we've got lots of ways to generate hope as well as reduce stress, so I'm okay with that. But mainly why I wanted to have a level 8 card, and I'm kind of maybe even going against my own advice from the very beginning of this video, so maybe don't listen to me. The reason I wanted to take a higher level card was because of the Channel Raw Power feature, which basically allows us to take a card from our loadout and put it to our vault and get a number of hope equal to that. So by having this card that is level 8, I don't know if I'd be using it all the time. It's nice to have, but I would be okay taking this right out of my loadout, putting it in my vault, and then marking a stress or using a 0 stress card to bring right back into my loadout, so I had 5. This is just a way to make sure that you're always topped off with hope because that's going to be an important thing for this character. And yeah, I think this is fantastic. And there you have it. That is the Infernal Artillerist. What was really unique about this build is that it comes online and does exactly what we want it to do at level 6. And because we are so focused on blasting, it makes some of these later level domain cards a little bit more difficult to. I think there's some pretty solid level 1 codex cards, like the one that gives you Tava's armor, which just increases your armor score by 1, I think is really good. But remember, we are going to be putting out close to 70 points of damage with 3 fireballs just by spending 2 hope and a stress. So being able to do that is huge. Now, again, that's situational, and you may not always be able to do that without hurting allies. But the fact that you can put that out or use your instinct weapon. And if you think about using your instinct weapon, in tier 4, when we have 6 proficiency and the ability to roll 2d10 on a fear, on average, that's almost 33 points of damage. And if we're able to target 3 or 4 different adversaries, you might be inflicting major damage on them, right? Plus, you could probably even, if you aren't marking a stress, to increase that range out to close range and you can hit just 2 adversaries in one area. Then you could even mark a stress and re-roll one of your damage die. So if you succeeded with fear and you got an 8 or a 9, you could just use that 9 and double that and add it to the other dice. So I think that there's a lot of different options on increasing the power on this, and I think that it's fun. This character is nice because it is a frontline monster that has the ability to take a ton of damage and burn all their enemies down. I think we pretty much hit the nail on the head with this one here. So if you like this video or thought it was interesting, go ahead and like and subscribe to this channel. This is something that we do every week, putting out new builds for Daggerheart. And if you have a build that you've been thinking about doing or wanting to create, leave me a comment down below because I would love to see what it is and to see if I could help you make that archetype a reality. And remember, hope is a resource, not a strategy. This build is both. I'll see you all next time.